The woman who wrecked my life texted me 2 weeks before my wedding. I'm not trying to be dramatic. I'm not even trying to be poetic about it. That's just the cleanest way to say what happened. And I've replayed those words in my head enough times over the last few days to know they fit. My name's Gideon. I'm getting married in 2 weeks. That sentence still feels strange to write, even though I've said it out loud 100 times in the last month, to my business partners, to my friends, to the guy who keeps calling about tux alterations, to the florist who keeps insisting we need a touch more eucalyptus. I'm getting married to the most solid, steady, incredible person I've ever met. Her name is Maris. Maris is a corporate attorney. She's the kind of person who walks into a room and doesn't need to announce that she belongs there. She just does. She has this calm confidence that doesn't bend for anyone, but it also doesn't need to shove people out of the way to exist. She's brilliant and precise and constantly thinking 3 steps ahead. But she's also funny in this dry, terrifyingly accurate way, like she can slice through your nonsense without raising her voice. And she grounds me. That might sound like a cliche, but after everything that happened years ago, grounding is exactly the right word. I didn't think I was capable of letting someone that close again. I didn't think I could belong to anyone in that way. Not after the way I lost it the first time. 6 years ago, I was supposed to get married too. Different woman, different life, different version of me. I was 28, convinced I knew how the world worked, convinced I'd already found the person I was going to grow old with. Back then, I thought love was a straight line. Meet someone, build a life, propose, set a date, show up. I didn't understand that sometimes people are quietly making choices behind your back while you're still planning for a future you think you're both aiming at. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Here's where I'm at right now. 3 days ago, I was sitting in my kitchen with Maris, eating takeout noodles out of those flimsy containers that always leak when my phone buzzed on the counter. I wasn't expecting anything. The wedding is small, low drama, mostly friends, no big family circus. So the only notifications I've been getting are from vendors and group chats about whether we should do a first look or not. I glanced down, and I saw her name, Kala. Just that single word on my screen, like a ghost, I'd trained myself not to believe in anymore. My chest actually tightened. I don't mean I felt uncomfortable. I mean I physically stopped breathing for a second. My brain did this late, stupid thing where it said, maybe it's someone else. Maybe you're misreading it. But I wasn't. Nobody else on my phone has that name. There's only one Kala. There's only ever been one. I didn't open it right away. I just stared at the screen like the phone might decide it was a mistake and take it back. Maris noticed. She looked over and said, "You okay?" I didn't answer. I picked up the phone. My fingers felt clumsy, like they didn't belong to me. The message read, "Gideon, I need to see you one last time, please. Everything isn't what you think it was." That was it. No signature. No build-up, no context. Just a sentence that dropped into my life like a brick through a window. I hadn't heard from her in 6 years. Not one word. No apology. No explanation. No, I hope you're okay. Nothing. I blocked her on everything the day after I left town, and I never once checked to see if she tried reaching out through someone else. I didn't want to know, because knowing would mean thinking about her again, and thinking about her was like poking a bruise that never fully healed. I just sat there, holding the phone, moving my eyes over the text, as if rereading it would change what it said. Maris didn't ask who it was. She knows the whole story. She knows more about my past than anyone alive. She didn't have to ask. I think she knew the second my face changed. "Is that her?" she said quietly. I nodded. She reached across the table and took the phone from me. Not to snoop, but because I was holding it like a grenade. She read it once. Then she read it again. Then she looked at me like she was measuring the weight of a decision she already knew I didn't want to make. "You don't owe her anything," she said. Not even a reply. I didn't say anything. I was still stuck on this one phrase in Kala's text. Everything isn't what you think it was. What does that even mean after 6 years of silence? There are only a few reasons you send a message like that to someone you broke. 1. You want to rewrite the story. 2. You want forgiveness. 3. You want attention when your own life is falling apart. Or maybe there's a reason I can't imagine. Maybe there's a piece missing. Maybe there's something I never knew. That last possibility is the one that keeps nudging at me, even when I tell myself not to listen. because 6 years ago, I walked in on something that didn't leave much room for misunderstanding. And yet, reading her text now made me feel this cold kind of confusion, like my brain ran into a wall it didn't expect. Maris slid the phone back to me. She didn't tell me what to do. That's not her style. She doesn't control people, and she doesn't pretend she knows what's inside my head better than I do. She waited. I thought I was done with all of this. I said, finally. You were, she replied, and you still are. But maybe there's a difference between being over something and having it truly closed. I stared at her. That sentence was so simple, and yet it hit somewhere deep. I pushed my noodles away because I'd lost my appetite. I tried to laugh it off, but it came out thin. What is she going to say? I asked. That she wasn't herself? That it was a mistake? That she had a reason? Maris didn't flinch. I don't know, she said. But whatever she has to say, it doesn't get to touch what we're building. The only question is whether hearing it helps you shut that door the way you wanted to 6 years ago. That's the part I've been stuck on. Because 6 years ago, I didn't shut any door. I ran. I left in the middle of the night, canceled everything, packed 2 suitcases, and drove 3 hours to a different city with the kind of quiet rage you only feel when you can't believe your own life anymore. There was no final conversation. No ending where I got to say what I needed to say. I just disappeared from that world because staying felt like drowning. And Kala was the match that lit the fire. But she wasn't the only thing that burned. So now I'm 2 weeks out from marrying the love of my life. And the past shows up uninvited, asking for one last time, like 6 years is a pause instead of a lifetime. Part of me wants to delete the message and keep moving, like I've done for 6 years, like I've earned the right to do. And part of me, the part that's trying to step into this marriage with nothing unresolved in the shadows, is wondering if silence is the same thing as closure. I don't know which part wins yet. All I know is that when her name popped up on my screen, it didn't feel like the past staying in the past. It felt like a door I nailed shut years ago rattling on its hinges. And I'm standing here with the hammer in my hand, asking myself whether I'm supposed to open it or slam it one final time. 6 years ago, I would have told you I was lucky. Not in the loud, corny way some people talk about relationships, but in the quiet, certain way you talk when you think something is settled. I was 28. I believed I'd found my person. I believed love moved in a straight line if you worked hard enough and meant what you said. Her name was Kala. Kala and I were together 4 years. We met right after college through mutual friends. I didn't even want to go to that party, but I went anyway, and she walked in late like she owned every second she was in the room. She had this sharp, magnetic energy, funny, opinionated, always a little daring. She wasn't cruel. She wasn't fake. She was just alive in a way that made you lean toward her without noticing. I fell fast. I'm not ashamed to admit that. We moved in together after 1.5 years. Our apartment wasn't big, but it was the first place I ever felt like could be a real home. We built routines, Sunday grocery runs, late-night takeout, playlists that became ours. We fought sometimes, but it was normal stuff, money, schedules, little resentments you work out because you're committed. Nothing that screamed danger. Nothing that told me I should watch my back. When I proposed, it wasn't some movie scene. It was a regular Saturday. I cooked dinner, put on music she loved, and asked her if she wanted to do this for real. She cried. She said yes. She hugged me, so hard my ribs hurt. I believed her in the simplest way possible, fully. We planned a wedding for October. The venue was booked, airy and warm with high windows and wood beams. Our families were flying in. Her dress was perfect. My suit was hanging in the closet. Deposits had been paid. People were excited. We had that bright, almost reckless confidence that comes with thinking you're starting the best chapter of your life. The week before the wedding was chaos, but good chaos. Calls, deliveries, last-minute details. Kala stayed at the apartment with her bridesmaids. I stayed at a hotel with my groomsmen. Traditions, I guess. I didn't care much either way. I was too busy trying to be present inside the moment I'd waited years for. The night before the wedding, I remember feeling calm. Not nervous calm. The kind of calm that comes after you've done the work, and now you're just waiting for the sunrise. My guys were half joking, half trying to keep things light. Somebody was watching a game. Somebody else was messing with my tie for tomorrow. My best man, Tarek, looked at me and said, You good? Yeah, I said. Just wired. Try not to faint at the altar, he said, tossing me a pillow. I laughed. I even went over our final checklist in my head. Vows printed, ring secure, gift for Calipact, envelopes ready for vendors. Everything was accounted for. Everything made sense. Then I remembered something small. The backup wedding band. Calla had insisted on a second set, just in case. We'd left it in a box at the apartment earlier that week. I meant to bring it to the hotel, but in the whirlwind, it got missed. No big deal. The apartment was 15 minutes away. I drive over, grab it, come back. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't want a whole groom on a mission moment. It was just a quick errand. So I drove across town around 9:45 p.m., parked in our lot, and used my key to get in around 10. The moment I stepped inside, I paused. The lights were on. We'd agreed no one would be there that late. Bridesmaids had supposedly left earlier. We were both supposed to be sleeping, but the living room lamp glowed. The hallway light, too. I could hear voices, low and close, somewhere down the hall. I told myself it was harmless. Someone forgot something. Calla was nervous and needed company. Maybe one of her friends was crashing on the couch last minute. It irritated me a little, but it didn't scare me yet. I walked down the hallway still in my jacket, keys in my hand. Then I heard her laugh. Not her usual laugh with friends, not the loud, carefree one. This was softer, almost private. The kind of laugh you don't share with a room. You share it with one person close enough to see what's behind it. The hair on my arms rose. My stomach tightened in that instinctive way your body does before your mind catches up. I reached our bedroom door. It was half closed. I pushed it open. Calla was on the bed. She wasn't alone. The other person was Hollis, my half-brother, my dad's golden child from his second marriage. The guy I'd let crash at our apartment when he needed a place. The guy I'd handed a spare key to months earlier because I thought family meant you trusted each other. He turned first. His face went blank, not stunned, not confused. Blank like someone caught doing something they knew they shouldn't be doing but hoped they'd never be forced to explain. Calla sat up fast. Her eyes went wide. She clutched the sheet to her chest like that mattered now. She said my name once, sharp and broken. Gideon. I didn't answer. There were 2 wine glasses on the nightstand, a bottle half empty, a throw blanket on the floor. Little signs that this wasn't a sudden mistake. Little signs of comfort, of repetition, of a night that had a shape and a pattern before I arrived. I looked at Hollis. He opened his mouth, like he wanted to talk, like he wanted to build a bridge out of words. I didn't let him. I looked at Calla. She started crying immediately, loud, panicked, not even trying to hide it. She kept saying my name over and over like she could rewind time by sheer volume. Gideon, I'm sorry, I didn't. Still, I said nothing. And then she said the one thing that turned the scene from betrayal into total demolition. She looked straight at me through her tears and said, I'm so sorry, but I never wanted to marry you. My brain didn't understand it first. It hovered in the air like a sentence meant for someone else. Then she added, in this shaking voice that somehow sounded sure, I wanted him. I've always wanted him. That was the moment something inside me went cold. Not anger, not hysteria, just a dead, stunned quiet. Because it meant the wedding tomorrow wasn't only ruined, it was never real the way I thought it was. I wasn't the person she was choosing. I was the person she was settling into a role beside. I nodded once, like my body needed to confirm I'd heard her. Then I turned and walked out. Behind me, I heard Hollis say something, wait, Gideon, listen, but I didn't listen. I left the apartment, got in my car, and drove through streets that suddenly felt unfamiliar. By midnight, I'd canceled the venue. By 2 a.m., I'd emailed everyone invited that the wedding was off. By sunrise, I was packing 2 suitcases. And by noon, on what was supposed to be my wedding day, I was on the highway leaving the city behind. I didn't call Calla. I didn't answer Hollis. I blocked them both and let the silence do what I couldn't. I didn't know who I'd be after that night. I only knew I couldn't stay there another hour longer. Leaving didn't feel brave. It felt like my body was on autopilot, pushing me forward because staying one more second in that city would have crushed whatever was left of me. I drove 3 hours to a different place because my college friend Rowan lived there. Rowan had been asking me for months to join his startup. We'd studied engineering together. He was always building something, always talking about problems he wanted to solve before anyone else noticed they existed. Every call ended the same way. You should be doing this with me. I always dodged it. I had a life back home, or at least I thought I did. When I showed up at his apartment that day, 2 suitcases, no notice, he didn't ask a lot of questions. He looked at my face and understood enough. He just said, "You can crash here. And if you won't work, we'll work. If you don't, that's fine too." That night, I lay on his couch, staring at the ceiling, listening to the colder, unfamiliar sounds of a new city. Every time my mind drifted, it dropped straight back into that bedroom door opening. The wine glasses, the stillness, the sentence I couldn't unhear. My brain kept trying to run what if calculations, like there was a version of the night where I walked in 10 minutes earlier or 10 minutes later and everything stayed intact. There wasn't. Morning came anyway. I didn't wake up healed. I woke up hollow. So I chose the only thing that didn't require me to feel much. Work. Rowan Startup was tiny back then. 2 desks, a whiteboard full of half-explained diagrams, and a product that barely existed. They were building construction project management software, tools for contractors to track bids, schedules, site updates, subcontractors, all in one place. It wasn't glamorous. It was necessary, and it was messy enough to swallow my full attention. I threw myself into it like a man trying to outrun a shadow. The first year was brutal. I worked 18-hour days, sometimes more. I coded until my fingers cramped. I sat in client meetings and nodded through problems I didn't understand, then went home and learned everything I needed to learn so I wouldn't be caught off guard the next time. When I wasn't at the office, I was thinking about the office. Because when I stopped thinking about the office, my mind went right back to the apartment I'd left behind. People think grief is just sadness. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's a constant, dry pressure behind your eyes. A question you can't answer that keeps tightening its grip. When did it start? How long had it been like that? Who knew? Was I the only one in the dark? I didn't have answers. So I worked. Some nights I'd step outside around 2 a.m. and just stand there in the parking lot catching cold air like it was a lifeline. The streets would be empty. The buildings would feel indifferent. And I'd tell myself, quietly, that if I just built something real, something that mattered, then the wreckage behind me would shrink until it felt far away. The work slowly started to pay off. Not in a clean movie way. There wasn't a single pivot moment where everything snapped into place, but in a stubborn, incremental way that only shows up if you keep your head down long enough. In year 2, our software started solving real problems. A mid-sized firm signed on, then another. They liked that our tool didn't pretend their world was tidy. They liked that it actually fit the way job sites run. Constant changes, tight margins, unpredictable timelines. We started getting referrals. We hired a small sales team. The office upgraded from barely functional to kind of legitimate. One afternoon, I sat across from a site manager with dust on his boots and tired lines in his face. He scrolled through our dashboard, then looked up and said, "This finally makes sense. You built it like you understand what we do." I didn't feel fireworks. I felt something steadier. Like after months of crawling, I'd finally found a slope that went upward. By year 3, we landed on the state's list of fastest growing companies. People suddenly wanted interviews. Investors called. Old acquaintances I hadn't heard from in years popped up with friendly messages that sounded a lot like business proposals. The recognition was nice, sure, but what mattered more was the quiet truth underneath it. I wasn't surviving anymore. I was building. By year 4, Rowan wanted out. Not because anything was wrong between us. He was just burned out. The grind had eaten him alive. He wanted to start something new with his wife, something slower and closer to home. We negotiated the buyout like adults, shook hands, had a beer afterward. He told me, "You were always the engine anyway. Don't let it die." I didn't. I expanded to 3 offices across the region. I hired people smarter than me. I learned the difference between doing everything yourself and leading something that can outgrow you. And somewhere along the climb, Calla and Hollis drifted to the background of my mind. Not because I forgave them. Not because I made peace with what happened. They just stopped taking up the front row of my thoughts. The anniversary of that night still hit hard, but it didn't flatten me for weeks anymore. I could say their names without my throat closing. The pain was still there, but it wasn't steering the car. That's when I met Maris. She entered my life through a contract dispute, of all things. One of my subcontractors had gotten tangled in a bitter argument with a client. Everyone was blaming everyone. The numbers didn't line up. The timeline was a mess. Maris represented the client. She was sharp, not loud, not theatrical, just prepared in a way that made you feel like you'd better be prepared too. She caught a gap in our wording that my team had missed. She didn't let me soften my way around it. She asked direct questions and waited for direct answers. We settled the dispute after 2 long sessions. When it was over, I found myself wanting to keep talking to her. There was something about the way she held her ground, without cruelty, without ego, that felt rare. So I asked her to dinner. She said no. Clear, polite, firm. I don't mix business and personal. 2 weeks later, we ran into each other at a networking event. I asked again, expecting the same answer. She said no again. I didn't push. I didn't sulk. I just said, all right, if you ever change your mind, you know where to find me. Then I walked away. The third time, I asked with less confidence and more honesty. I told her, I'm not trying to be a problem. I just think you're someone I'd be lucky to know outside of a conference room. She studied me for a second. Then she said, okay, one dinner. That first dinner was simple. No dramatic sparks. No speeches about destiny. We talked about law, construction, books, the way cities change, and people pretend they don't notice. She had this dry humor that could cut through my seriousness without making me feel small. She listened in a way that made me feel like I didn't have to perform. It took months before I told her the full story of my past. Not because I was hiding it, but because it felt like something that belonged to a stranger. A different version of me. But one night, after I went quiet for reasons I couldn't explain, she said, something's weighing on you. I'm not going anywhere. Tell me when you're ready. So I did. I told her about the wedding, the betrayal, the way I left, the way I worked until I was numb. I told her the sentence that had rearranged my entire life. She didn't interrupt. She didn't try to fix it. She didn't tell me I needed to forgive anyone. She just sat beside me and let the truth be real. 2 years later, I proposed. She said yes like she'd already decided a long time ago. We planned a small wedding. Friends who had earned their place in our lives. No performance, no chaos. Just us choosing each other clearly. For the first time, marriage didn't feel like a leap into uncertainty. It felt like coming home. And then, 3 days ago, Kala's name showed up on my phone. Like the past had been waiting in the dark for the moment my future mattered most. I didn't answer Kala's message right away. I stared at it for a full day, then another. Every time I thought about replying, I felt my body tense like I was stepping toward a cliff edge. I kept thinking, why now? 6 years of silence, and the moment I'm about to marry someone else, she suddenly needs one last time. Maris didn't pressure me. She never does. She let the question sit between us until I was ready to say it out loud. I don't know what she wants, I told her on the second night. But if I ignore it, I'm afraid it'll stay unfinished in my head. Maris nodded like she'd expected that answer. Then if you meet her, she said, you do it properly. On your terms. Public place. No privacy. No space for her to steer the story. That line landed hard. No space for her to steer the story. Because that's what I was most afraid of. Not that she'd convince me of anything. Not that she'd break me all over again. But that she'd try to reshape what happened into something softer, something that fit her conscience, and I'd be forced to sit there while she did it. So we made a plan. I replied the next morning with one sentence. Tomorrow, 7 p.m., Edison Lounge downtown. Come alone. Edison was in the financial district, upscale, busy, loud enough that nobody could turn it into a private drama. It wasn't anywhere Kala and I had ever gone. No old memories clinging to the corners. Just neutral ground. What I didn't tell her was that I wouldn't be alone either. Maris insisted on coming. Not as a bodyguard. Not as a heroine. Just as a fact. I'm your future, she said. And she needs to see that clearly. So the next evening, we showed up early. I wore a simple dark jacket. Maris walked in beside me in a charcoal suit that made her look like she could cross-examine the air and make it confess. She wasn't trying to intimidate anyone. She just exists that way. My 2 closest friends from the business, Tarek and Dev, were already there at another table. The plan was obvious without being dramatic. I talked to Kala, but I wouldn't be isolated. No whispered corner conversation, no teary manipulation, no chance for her to stage a scene that became our secret. We took a corner booth with a clear view of the entrance. I tried to steady my breathing. I told myself I was there to close a door. Nothing else. At 7:03, she walked in. For a second, I didn't recognize her. 6 years is a long time, and people change. But this wasn't just time. This was weight. She looked smaller than I remembered, like something had drained out of her. Her clothes were nice enough, but not the bold, expensive style she used to favor. Her hair was cut differently. Her shoulders seemed tense, hunched in a way that made her look like she was bracing for impact. But it was her eyes that hit me. They had a desperate, hollow look, like she'd been living in a room with no windows. She spotted me immediately. Then her gaze flicked to Maris, then to Tarek and Dev at the nearby table. Her face tightened with confusion and something like defeat, all at once. She walked over slowly, clutching her purse like a shield. "Gideon," she said. Her voice was quieter than I remembered. "You said you needed to talk," I replied evenly. "So talk. This is Maris, my fiancée." Maris nodded once, polite but distant. She didn't offer her hand. She didn't need to. Kala stared at her for a beat too long. I watched something shift across her face. Surprise, then a kind of sinking realization. "I didn't realize you'd bring people," she said. "You asked to see me," I said. "Not to see me alone." Her mouth opened, closed. She slid into the seat across from us. "Can we talk privately?" she asked, voice shaking. "No," I said. "Not harsh. Just final. Whatever you came to say, you can say here." Her eyes filled with tears almost immediately, like they'd been waiting at the edge of her lashes. She took a breath and started. "Gideon, I know what I did was unforgivable, but you need to know." "Kala," I lifted a hand. "You texted me saying everything isn't what I think it was. I'm here. Tell me what you meant." She flinched at the bluntness. Then she looked down at the table like it might offer her script. "Hollis, it wasn't supposed to happen," she began, rushing the words. "It just, don't," I cut in, still quiet. "Do not tell me it just happened. I saw you. There were wine glasses. You were comfortable. That wasn't a single bad moment." Her breath broke. Tears slid down her cheeks. "You're right," she whispered. "It wasn't the first time." Silence pressed in around us. The bar noise felt far away. "How long?" I asked. 3 months, she said. 3 months. 3 months of waking up beside me, planning a wedding, smiling at my family. 3 months of living a lie I didn't even know existed. Maris didn't move, but I felt the tension at her side like a blade. Callus sucked in a breath. "I'm not asking you to understand. I need to know I'm sorry. I've been sorry every day. And what exactly are you sorry for?" I asked. "For what you did, or for what it cost you?" She looked up, startled. "Both," she said quickly. "I lost everything after you left. Hollis left me too. He said he wasn't ready for anything serious. People found out what happened, and I lost my job. Our friends cut me off. My parents barely talk to me now. I've been in therapy. I try to figure out why I ruined something good. Hearing all that, I expected to feel something. Vindication, maybe, or anger, or satisfaction. Instead, I felt almost nothing. Just a faint hollow echo where a reaction should have been. "And why tell me this now?" I asked. She hesitated. "Because you're getting married," she said. "I heard through someone. I couldn't let you go into another marriage without knowing that I regret what I did." Maris leaned forward slightly, voice calm but sharp. "You didn't reach out for him. You reached out for you." Kalla's head snapped toward her. "That's not fair." "It is fair," Maris said. "You want him to forgive you so you can feel better. That's not closure. That's absolution." Kalla's hands trembled in her lap. "I just want to say I'm sorry." I watched her. I believed she was sorry in the way people are sorry when they've lived with consequences they didn't expect. But sorry doesn't undo a choice. Sorry doesn't erase the cost. I took a slow breath. "You want me to say something that makes you feel less guilty," I said. "But I can't do that. What you did 6 years ago changed the entire direction of my life. I left. I rebuilt from scratch. And honestly, I'm better now." Her face crumpled. "So you're glad it happened?" No, I said. I'm saying I've moved on. I don't think about you anymore. I don't wonder what if. You're not part of my life. She stared at me like I'd hit her with something heavier than anger. But I loved you, she whispered. Maybe, I said. But love isn't what you did with it. I stood up. My legs felt steady. That surprised me. Thank you for coming, I said. I think I needed to see you once to realize how finished this is for me. This is goodbye, Calla. For real. Maris stood with me. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. From this point forward, you do not contact Gideon again, she said to Calla. Each word clean and precise. Not for apologies. Not for closure. We're getting married in 10 days. You will not be part of our lives in any capacity. Are we clear? Calla nodded silently, tears still falling. We left her sitting there. The drive home was quiet. Maris held my hand the whole way, steady as a compass. When we got home, she poured us 2 drinks and asked, "How do you feel?" I searched for the answer and found it fast. Lighter, I said, like I put down something I didn't realize I was still carrying. She smiled once, small and real. Good, she said. Now we get married, and we don't look back. I believed her. I also believed the night was over. I was wrong about that. I walked out of Edison thinking that was the end of it. Not because I expected Calla to disappear from the world, but because I expected her to disappear from mine. I'd heard what she came to say. I'd said what I needed to say. I felt strangely light afterward, like a chapter had finally shut. Then, that same night, the past knocked again. About an hour after we got home, my phone buzzed from an unknown number. I heard you met with Calla. We should talk too. I need to explain. I didn't have to guess. It was Hollis. 6 years of silence, and now he wanted a conversation right before my wedding. I didn't feel anger or curiosity, just a clear, flat refusal. I blocked the number immediately. One reunion was already more than enough. 2 days later, my father called. We hadn't really spoken since that night years ago. When I left the city, he called it running. When I cut Hollis off, he called it overreacting. He chose Hollis then and never tried to hide it. So seeing his name on my phone felt like hearing a door creak in a house you moved out of long ago. I answered anyway. Gideon, he said, voice weary. Hollis told me you met with Calla. He's struggling. He wants to apologize before your wedding. He wants the family to be there for you. I let out a small laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was unreal. You're calling to advocate for him, I said. The same Hollis who destroyed my first wedding. It was a long time ago, he replied. People make mistakes. He's family. No, I said. He stopped being family when he betrayed me. And you stopped being my father when you defended it. Silence. That's not fair, he finally said. Fair is a word you use when both sides share the cost, I answered. You didn't carry what I carried. You made your choice 6 years ago. I made mine. I left. I built a life you weren't part of. I'm getting married in 4 days to someone who respects me. Hollis doesn't get to crawl back now, and neither do you. He tried to speak again. I didn't let him. Don't call me for him. Don't come to my wedding. You weren't invited, I said, and hung up. Afterward, my hands were steady. My chest was steady. I felt no guilt, just clarity. Maris squeezed my hand once and said, I'm proud of you. That was all I needed. I thought that would be the last ripple. It wasn't. The next afternoon, my best friend Tara called, furious. Gideon, Calla showed up at my office. I froze. Why? She said she was worried about you, he said. Told me you're rushing into marriage without dealing with old trauma. Suggested I convince you to postpone the wedding. I told her to leave. That hit harder than any apology. She hadn't come looking for me anymore. She came looking for influence. Like she still had a right to touch my life through my friends. When Maris heard that, she didn't debate. She acted. That evening she had a cease and desist letter delivered to Calla. Short, formal, unambiguous. Any further contact with me, Maris, or our circle would be treated as harassment, with legal consequences. She didn't ask me first. She just protected what we'd built. The next morning, a long email from Hollis arrived. I skimmed enough to catch the shape. He'd grown. He was engaged. He wanted peace before his own wedding, and he asked me to be compassionate because Calla was not well. I forwarded it to Maris and didn't respond. The wedding was 4 days away. We tightened the guest list at the private estate, briefed security, and moved forward without drama. I won't pretend I had zero nerves, but I wasn't ruled by them. I knew what mattered, and I knew who mattered. The day before the ceremony, I got one last text from a blocked number. "I'm sorry, Gideon. I assumed it was Kala. Maybe it was sincere. Maybe it was for herself. Either way, it didn't belong in my future." I deleted it. The wedding was simple and perfect. No one from my past appeared. No scenes. No surprises. Just sunlight, close friends, and Maris walking toward me like the only true decision in the room. During our first dance, she whispered, "No regrets?" I knew what she meant. "None," I whispered back. We took a short honeymoon in Colorado, then returned to normal life, work, laundry, case files on the coffee table. One night, I watched Maris fall asleep on the couch, glasses crooked, papers sliding off her lap, and I felt something settle in me. People say you need to forgive to move on. I don't believe that. I moved on by building a life that didn't include them. The past tried to claw its way back in, but it found the door locked, and me on the other side, finally at home. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what happened. Take care.